For Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, the divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Aloha, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Lesson. I'm getting some kind of feedback here. Anyway, producer, let me know if you're getting feedback, if we need to switch to our cell phones. But today we have a very special show with myself and Dr. Lesson and Emily-Windsor-Cragg and Robert Evans Jr. These are two Anunnaki, Ancient Aliens, Planet X, Nibiru researchers, and they're quite extraordinary, become my good friends. We've been researching what's going on from the ancient to the modern. Dr. Lesson, would you like to say something?
This is a program where we have our guests who are able to connect the ancient stuff we've been talking about in our various studies of ancient aliens right up to modern days, so you can see their influences are still there, and the planetary influences that they talk about are certainly there.
So we're going to do a little roundtable type discussion this evening, and so each person can kind of look at your clock. I don't want to have to micromanage, but speak for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then pause and breathe and see if somebody has something to interject or if it's time to pass the ball. And so we're going to start, we're going to go based on seniority. And Dr. Lesson, you're the eldest. Would you like to start this evening's discussion, or should...
That's fine. 450,000 years ago, big people, Homo sapiens, basically like us, 9 to 12 feet tall, from the planet Nibiru, came to Earth to mine gold. And they came with in rockets. They had a dictatorship, a military dictatorship, a kingship. They had almost wiped themselves out in a thermonuclear war, and they had their atmosphere had big holes in it like ours. And they thought they could float monoatomic gold powder up, and that way they would save their atmosphere. Now, Nibiru passes through, at that time, passed through our inner solar system every 3,600 years. And sometimes when it passed, when the Earth was in the wrong position relative to Nibiru or relative to the debris that's followed in its orbit 180 degrees away, its Lagrange points, then there was often terrible, terrible disturbances on Earth with magma flowing and floods, Noah's flood, and so forth. They were working the mines, and they lived for a long time here. 300,000 years ago, they adapted their genome to Earth using a few genes from Homo erectus. That's the ancestor of modern Bigfoot, who's still with us, and a little copper and a little clay. And they made the Adamu, the people that worked the mines in the south of Africa. And then 200,000 years ago, Enki, their chief scientist, made a couple of babies with two of the pretty girls among the Earthlings, and these children were called Titi and Adapa, and they were geniuses. They were wonderful. And so Enki and his wife and his partner Nimma and their son, Enki's son Ningishita, got together, and they said, we're going to really educate and see. We have made creatures that will do better than we did. We've been killing each other and warring, and we're all hung up on hierarchy. These creatures are so brilliant. And so it turns out that he brought them from South Africa, Zimbabwe, to his nice place up in Eridu. sort of near where modern Basra is in Iraq. And their little Titi got pregnant, and she was so happy and excited, and it was like she realized she'd had a spiritual experience. It wasn't just animal sex the way that her ancestors and everyone around her had been doing, but she was a very conscious person, and she made a little apron, and she made a table of sticks, and this bright teenage person's there, and Enlil, the commander, comes over, and he says, "What is going on here?" And their neighbors at Enki's place, and little Titi goes right up to Enlil and says, "I'm Titi, look what I made, and see my pretty things that I made," and you know the rest of the story.
I love it.
Maybe they don't, but Emily, you're next. I just wanted to ask you, like, what's up for you? What are you researching? I know that you are like Dr. Lesson or like Robert Bob, and you are continually on the internet and doing research and reading and paying attention to what's going on. So
okay, cool. All right, now I've taken Dr. Sasha's information about the people of the Anunnaki, and I'm a remote viewer. And so what I do, because I know digital imagery, is I go into space photos to see how they are interacting with us now. Because of treaties, we're not allowed to know how they're interacting with us now. We know that there was an Emerald Covenant Treaty. We know that there was a slave system set up under hierarchy. So my job is to make a synthesis. How do we, from here, where we are now, with this huge history of slavery and racism and sexism and culling and wars, how do we plan a future for the people who are here that keeps what the Anunnaki gave us, which was marvelous. They gave us agriculture and engineering and librarying and written language, and, you know, they gave us so much. But the one thing they gave us that we've had a terrible time with is hierarchy, because they are a uniform race, top to bottom, like a beehive or like a pride of lions, okay? And we on this planet, this is the Star Wars bar scene, I'll tell you that. This is the Star Wars bar scene. We've got every kind of hominid, two-legged, that you can even imagine, and you can't just have one set of rules for everybody. So I'm trying to get to a place where we can speak to the issues of how do we change or obliterate or alter or amend or edit hierarchy so that the human race, so that people have a sense of consenting to what they're living in, okay? And that's my clear job. And the way I'm getting to the synthesis of that is, one, I've thrown out every piece of NASA text I've ever seen about any NASA photograph they ever had, because their text never matches their photographs. And I'm looking at the evidence on moons, on planets, on asteroids, of how human bipeds are, if they're there, what are their lives like? And I've been able to glean quite a bit, you know, actually, and I'm just putting together a book with all my best pictures and explaining, okay, here's where we've been, here's where we are now, and here's some ideas to move forward. So that's what I do.
Wow, thank you. Bob.
Yes.
Update. How's things going on with you? What's your research showing?
Well, I've been going through a lot of my old research, and I found a lot of stuff I'd forgotten about. One of them was a talk show radio that was back in 2012 that was telling exactly how the U.S. government or the powers that be were pulling everything back from all three of our coastlines. in preparation of Nibiru. And I sent a copy to both you and Dr. Lesson. It's a 54-minute thing from Orion Talk Radio, and they were talking about pulling all the important information radio antennas and stuff. They had built 4 immense, and I mean immense, food storage places right in the middle of our country. And our country was divided up into A, B, C, and D. And all this stuff was, it was just something else. The way this lady was following all the contracts that they were going through, and all this stuff was being pulled back from the Pacific, the Gulf Coast down by Mexico, and on the eastern side. So, I'm just going a little bit slow. I'm going through every single thing I had researched and had saved all these years. That way I can go back and this one part here talks about this one talks about this, and the radio show went into great detail as to how the U.S. government had really been preparing. Even they talked about the ammunition that was being bought up by the U.S. government back then. Every one of the agencies that were just buying up massive amounts of ammunition because they were waiting for everything to happen, and nothing happened. Hopefully that was because the aliens intervened with the stuff they have around their sun. So that's what I've mostly been working on the last couple of days, the last weeks, just going back through everything I've had. I wish I had Emily's abilities to do the remote viewing. I've heard about that stuff. That's fantastic. But that's what I've been up to.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob.
Sure.
And now we'd like to hear a little bit from Janet, has really immersed herself totally in the wisdom of Nimma, and she actually can speak as close as anybody I know to what the essence of Nimma is, and it's the feminine consciousness that Nimma has been, and Damkina and Nisaba and the other wisdom figures of both the Anunnaki and the humans, for that matter, have been, their lights are so bright that the patriarchy that Enlil has imposed upon us, given the models he was living with, have just stifled. And Janet S. Nimma has been giving us the wisdom of how we can break out of this. Janet.
I wasn't expecting that. Anyway, the last couple days I've been in a major download. Emily, you and I have a similar lineage, and we apparently are connected somehow biologically and spiritually to the Anunnaki and that lineage. And you can explain when it's your turn about your lineage. But I'm an experiencer. I've had contact all the way back to the crib. I've been integrating my experiences. I am in constant contact right now with some of these extraterrestrial beings that I have been interacting with all of my life, and I'm entering into an era of extreme telepathic communication. So the last 2 or 3 nights I've been in this altered state of consciousness. I've been on another planet. The details are just mind-boggling. The technology, what I'm experiencing is super advanced technology, which would be akin to taking someone from, 1700 or 1800 and dropping them into, 2014. Their minds would be blown. So when I'm on this planet, I am receiving a telepathic message to not try to analyze everything, because there's a tendency, being a human being of this modern age and technology, that we subconsciously say, how does that work? How does this work? And my time with them is so short, it's like I can't worry about those things, just accept it. And so I appear to be traveling. It's like I'm using my own feet, but somehow one step is like walking 3 blocks. Every step I'm just propelled wherever I want to go. And it's all based on thought. I don't see any mechanism. I don't see anything that I'm traveling on, but I'm aware that there's some kind of system where I can travel, and there's architecture that is so profound that there's no way that we could do it. When you're there at this planet, you're saying, that's not human. How could they do it? There's no way that we could do it. So that's about all I want to say in my turn here, but I feel very blessed that I am receiving ongoing communication from extraterrestrials, and I'm very excited. Something super positive is on the verge of happening, while at the same time, when I get on the computer, I wake up and I come back to Earth, and we have signs of Ebola Gate and the ISIS crisis, and people are talking a lot about Planet X Nibiru, and it seems like Planet X, they're on a timeline where they're seeing Planet X causing major cataclysm, and this is all some kind of throes of the Illuminati and desperation, trying to keep us blocked on their timeline, their paradigm, and no matter what they're throwing at me, personally, I'm still staying on the positive timeline, which I was shown when I was 4 years old, that I can get on the timeline and create that, not only for myself, but for everybody I love, and my commitment was to love everybody, at least in a divine, unconditional way, by the time this time that we're in came to pass. Back to you, Emily. Oh, do you have something to say?
Well, it's my turn. Aren't we taking turns?
Oh, it's your turn. I'm taking his turn. Sorry. Go back to your turn.
Yeah, I'm an anthropologist, and so I look at what we dig out of the earth and what ruins we have. And what is obvious is that the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki means those who came down from the sky. That's the Nibiruans. They provide all over this entire globe, right on the global ley lines, monuments where you could meditate and meditate in group form, and actually reach like an Akashic field where you could remotely view. But even more than that, by changing the sight lines, you could account for when the apparent movement of stars and moon and sun and eclipses would occur. Because the Earth is on a slant, which changes slightly. It's called the precession of the equinoxes, and they had to keep adjusting the sight lines so that we can tell when each of these different sites, like the Serpent Mound in Ohio, Stonehenge, Angkor Wat, Göbekli Tepe, and other, of course, the Giza pyramids and the temple at Jerusalem, all laid out exactly to the same plan, having internal dynamics and measurements, which provided the basis of all mathematics of everything, and showed the apparent movement of stars and the movement of planets, which they recorded and expected, which were beyond the eyesight of the people that have that. And when we find people meditating alone, there's a Telhar field called an energy field above them. And when they meditate together, it's even stronger. When they meditate in a group, it's even stronger. And when they do it at these sites, like Machu Picchu and other sites like that, especially huge groups of people, or people in a stadium all praying for peace, especially if it's been used for the centuries and it's an ancient stadium like the mounds of the mound builders, who were Anunnaki, we see, yes, we have been left with computers of stone that can help us.
Emily.
You know, Sasha, you're reminding me of Mike Tellinger. Mike Tellinger has a 2-hour video in which he discusses the stone circles in South Africa. And I've noticed how different they are from the stone circles in the United Kingdom. And in the 2 hours, I began to notice that he was doing scientific measurements, and that the temperature of the ground, of the earth, inside the stone circles in South Africa was tens of degrees higher than the temperature around on the outside of the stone circles. And the ones in South Africa were all connected to each other, sort of like lines of electricity. They were all connected. And if
Yes,
you built
that's
your
right.
house in the middle of a stone circle, the temperature of the ground under your house was 20 or 30 degrees hotter than the temperature outside of the stone circle. I just thought that was so cool. Now, in the UK, they also have stone circles, and so one of the things I'm wondering now is whether the stone circles in the UK have the same effect on the temperature of the ground as the ones in South Africa. That was just such a wonderful discovery that they used free energy how many thousands of years ago. And you know, anthropology is still in their textbooks only going back 6,000 years. You would think they were a bunch of Bible-thumping Christians, for God's sake. I get a kick out of them. But anyway, there might be a way to do what the South Africans have done and connect each other using ring stones that are basically volcanic in origin, and get our electricity and our heating for our house that way. It's so cool. The people in the past had such a command of themselves that we no longer have. And I think this journey for me started about 15 years ago when I began to see and realize the enormity of this disinformation and the lies and the pure confabulations that are coming at us from the media because of the non-disclosure policies of government. And so I'm trying to thread my way through that, okay? And I'm noticing, like Sasha says, that the Anunnaki did a whole bunch of good for us. They gave us a whole bunch of wonderful presents, okay, like Christmas. But the hierarchy hasn't worked out. All right, hierarchy hasn't worked out. So now what do we do about that? Now, in order to know what we have to do about it legally, because the Emerald Covenant Treaty, which was crafted after the Lyran Wars, and the Lyran Wars were 1 million years ago, okay? And the only person I know who knows very much about this is Dean, Ashiana Dean. Yeah, and I've read her books enough to realize what is in the Emerald Covenant that we have a problem with, and that is the Emerald Covenant specifies the races that are to be preferred, indulged, and progressed, and everybody else is just part of the landscape. Oops. We can't do that here because the bell-shaped curve on abilities and gifts in any race, the way it plays out is that every race has their gifted people. Every race has their gifted and their dull and their middle of the road. And so what we somehow have to do on our planet, instead of only putting the white race at the top because they're intellectually superior, which is BS, but anyway, instead of putting the white race at the top, we perhaps can adopt a meritocratic a form of leadership, as they are doing, I think, in China, because in China the people are extremely uniform racially. And a meritocracy may be the way for us to go. So that's what I'm thinking about while I'm working on my book, Path to Orion, which shows the data from which I have learned my theory of what is going on in the sky. Okay, I don't know how much time we have here today.
2 hours.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my
And we're going to have a break at the top of the hour, so not to worry. We'll cover everything.
We'll cover everything? Okay, because what is going on in the sky is not what we're being told is going on in the sky. And so somebody had to figure out what is the difference between the pictures and the text? And that's what I've been working on now for about 10 years. I have 28,000 images on my hard drive.
Wow.
And I lost a whole hard drive of another 150,000 images. But anyway, I look through photographs, That's what a remote viewer does, is look through the photograph to see what's past the photograph. And I have techniques for seeing past the white light into the black light, because Nibiru itself is a black light, dark matter, toroid shaped, which means it's the shape of a tire inner tube, planetoid. And it is flexible. When it's en route, it has the ability to suck itself up like a sphere, and then you just see a donut hole in the middle. And that's the way it travels. But when it gets where it's going, it spreads out, and it can spread out quite a distance. Right now, it's spread out like a belt around our atmosphere, which it has done every single time it has come through 19 times. This is the 19th one. We have history of 19.
We have history 19 times.
19 times it has come around. And every time it comes around, it causes the same problems. Okay? It overheats the equator, and the poles freeze because its little sun, wormwood, isn't powerful enough to spread its light to the poles. So the poles freeze, and the ice comes down a lot further than it would otherwise, and the equator bakes, okay, and there are a lot more storms, and so there are a lot more earthquakes, and there's a lot more problems that way. And we may have to change architecture in order to accommodate the fact that I don't think Nibiru is going to let go of us this time. I don't
All
think.
right. Well, let's pause right there. We'll give Bob a chance. So your last, Nibiru is not going to let go of us. So hold that thought.
Okay.
We're going to go back. We're going to go to Bob, give him a chance to address some things, and then Sasha's taking notes. I recommend you take notes in between when someone else is speaking, so when it comes to your turn, you can address what they talked about.
Okay.
So we'll keep going round table at about 5 minutes each person, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Okay, Bob, what would you like to say?
Okay, the possibility of Nibiru not letting go of us this time around is very probable. All of the nations have built their deep underground military bases. With Nibiru coming up from below our system and our planet orbiting counterclockwise towards its spot, that was the reason why the Norwegian politician gave for having built the deep underground military bases there in Norway, and also one of the Doomsday Seed Vaults has 60 Minutes called up there in Svalbard, Norway. These seed vaults are all around the planet. So they knew exactly what happened last time. They knew exactly about it raining fire down on the earth, causing all the planets to be destroyed. Everything that was put down during the last Exodus with Ippawur, they knew what would happen. So they built all this stuff in these deep underground vaults to hopefully protect the elite.
Adam.
And the FEMA camps, in my opinion, were all built for the survivors. I've been going back through all my research. I've come across numerous dreams and nightmares from people telling me that a huge wall of water came in over the Pacific and just washed almost everything away. And the survivors actually had to hide from our current government because the government was picking them up, grabbing them by helicopters, and putting them in the camps. I have several accounts of that. So everyone, at least the powers that be, have been dealing with that possibility. I went through most of my stuff, and a lot of the caves around the country were being sealed up. So people could not go into the caves to try and hide from them. Now, whether this was because of the remote viewers giving their idea with that 2008 to 2013 plan that they had and they put in front of everybody, or whether it was because some of the military were hearing from the higher-ups telling them to get away from all the coastlines to go up into the Allegheny Mountains back east and up towards Colorado and those areas. There's one, I can't remember her name right now. She's a Native American, and she did a thing with Return of Planet X, and she had a huge dream that was put before her and a friend, saying that all of the Great Lakes would be dumping straight down the Mississippi, and all this stuff would have and I know, Janet, you don't like to talk about all the stuff that was predicted, but that is exactly what our U.S. government and all the other governments were planning for. That's why they built all this stuff around the world, and they're keeping it all nice and quiet. And that's why that 54-minute radio talk show just goes into complete detail as to what was being shifted around into the middle of our country. Up in Colorado, and right in the middle of our country was 4 immense food storages that were built. This was 2012. And the rest of the country was divided up into 4 sectors. And each one of the sectors had to take care of whatever was in their own section. And some of the states were not even mentioned. You guys will hear that when you listen to the talk show radio. So, humanity has gone through an amnesia, exactly like Velikovsky said. In the building of the Ark part that I actually had on this same radio show, it mentioned about chariots, and that's like 12,900 something years ago. So it wasn't just the Hyksos that understood chariots, but they had chariots back then before the Great Flood. So we actually had the wheel. But all this stuff has been lost over time because of one war after the other. All the knowledge that we've known for just centuries going back has been lost. And we're only just now starting to relearn some of the stuff.
All right. We are pulling on Robert Morningstar, who...
Do you have a little of his bio?
Yeah, we're going to have the line ringing. We'll just have him... I can't change screens right now. We'll just have him introduce himself a little bit, and we'll tell him what's going on. So go ahead, Sean, producer, bring on Robert Morningstar to our conversation. And in the meanwhile, let's see, I haven't heard from you.
I have a thought.
Yes, Emily?
Okay. Well, as far as what Bob is saying. Now, Bob is talking about the judgments that the government has made about what is going on. Whoops. And he's talking about what the government is doing. But you see, at the Anunnaki level and at the Yahweh sovereign, whatever the creator is, they have a level of judgments also. And what I've been hearing at that level is that they have discovered that the people who are law-abiding and who are decent are the same people who are absolutely unaware of what's going on, and the people who are being herded into these FEMA camps who are disruptive and unruly are the people who are actually aware and intelligent, and they've got a problem.
Right. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
We have with us, listeners, we have Robert Morningstar joining us. And Robert, for your information, I didn't hear from you, so we created a little panel. We have Emily-Windsor-Cragg, Robert Evans Jr., myself, I'm Janet Lessin, and Dr. Sasha Lessin is my husband and co-host of the show. So, Robert, welcome to the show, and what we're doing is a little roundtable. We're discussing the current issues based on the ancient aliens, Anunnaki, and Douglas wants to say something.
In anthropology, there's this a huge argument by academic anthropologists who say that the ancient mound builders actually were just the ancestors of the modern Indian tribes, whereas almost all the modern Indians say, oh no, these people were here before us, and there's giant skeletons that have been found in mounts from Catalina Island all the way to New England of really big 9 to 12 feet people with red and blonde hair, and these were the Anunnaki.
So, Robert, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hey, thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. I had trouble because I didn't have a call-in number, and I actually was at a big UFO meeting here in New York City discussing these very things, the awakening of people.
You're a little bit low. I wonder if we can adjust your sound a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to go to a different phone. Let me see.
Okay.
How does it sound?
Much better,
Hello?
much better. Okay, so you're discussing these issues at a UFO meeting in New York right now, and you just came from it. So tell us, what's going on?
Well, is that Robert Evans who was talking about the Anunnaki and what's been found?
I guess that was Dr. Lesson, and you missed Robert Evans. So that's my husband, Dr. Sasha.
I'm sorry. Apologies. Well, what I was going to say, I asked the question, have you seen what's been discovered in Russia, in Siberia, as far as cyclopean walls and giant structures? One of the things that has been brought to my attention recently is that Russia's takeover of Crimea was largely in part because of a discovery that they've made of one of the biggest pyramids on the planet has been discovered in Crimea.
Yeah.
And they've been excavating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out that the Crimea is a region that has traditionally built pyramidal-shaped houses and buildings since time immemorial, and they didn't know why they traditionally built it. And a couple of years ago, they discovered a giant buried pyramid that rivals the pyramids of Egypt. And some people believe that Putin, one of his main goals or reasons for jumping into the Crimea and taking it over was to seize this site.
Well, sure, and and Kosovo has pyramids, and UK has them, and Ohio has them, and Alaska.
Yeah, is that Eleanor?
It's Emily. Yes, Emily.
Emily, we've had exchanges on email over the years, but we've never spoken before.
Yes,
nice
hi,
to hear
Robert.
your voice.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you. Yes, there are pyramids all over the world, and apparently there is a mathematical grid where they can be predicted to actually exist, and some of them, of course, are now because the ocean levels have risen so much since the flood of Noah's day. Some of them are underwater, some of them are under land, they're all over the place. But at one time, clearly, there was a global network of pyramids that the history and anthropology departments don't own up to yet.
Yeah, pyramids and obelisks. A lot of people don't know that the world religion today, Roman Catholicism is really an overlay over the ancient Egyptian religion. And there's a very arcane architecture that's employed involving sacred geometry. But if you look into the center of St. Peter's Plaza in front of the Basilica over there in Rome, what you find is an authentic, gigantic Cleopatra's Needle obelisk. And there are three of those. One is in the Vatican, the other one is in London, and the third one that I know of is here in New York. And I visited every couple of years to do Tai Chi there. It's huge. It's about 70 feet tall, the one here in New York.
But they got there. The Egyptians got it from the Babylonians, who got it from the Anunnaki, our friends, the Anunnaki.
All of it. I'm not a friend of the Anunnakis, to be honest with you. I feel that they were very deceptive tyrants and established a worldwide tyranny that has spread. Their method of controlling people's organizations, society, and their methods of controlling people's ideas, mind control, is still prevalent, but fortunately it's being broken, and that's what this big UFO meeting was about here in New York that I attended, discussing the fact that all truth is breaking loose simultaneously, and it's impossible for the powers of deception to put the lid back on it. It's just too much. I would like to take this opportunity because to announce something very important. I have discovered the missing frames of the Zapruder film. This is going to change. Yeah, the missing frames from the Zapruder film. I proved in 1992, 93 to 98, that was my work, I proved that the Zapruder film is an optical illusion, that about 10 feet of film have been removed from it, that key frames in different sections have been removed that would reveal the multiple shooters. And I prayed during all that time that one day, somehow, one intact version of the film might have survived. And it was leaked to me it was leaked to me not by a person, but by Google.
Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness.
November 22nd, 2013, as I sat here in New York, waiting between a radio show at 7 o'clock on Far Out Radio and a visit with George Noory on Coast to Coast at 4 a.m., I had a choice of going to sleep or staying awake and pumping a lot of coffee down my throat. I chose the latter, and while going and refreshing the facts, you might say, I was going from site to site, all of a sudden an icon appeared on my desktop, and it said it was a Zapruder film, and I looked at it again. I've seen it 10,000 times, but something about this one attracted me. It looked older, it looked wrinkled, and I said, what the heck is that? And lo and behold, as I watched this, I realized, oh, my Lord, this is the real thing. And the real thing is, I'll tell you what it is. I've been trying to prepare the public for a year for this because the shock, the realization of what really happened, the cover-up, and the degree, the magnitude of the deception is so great that people are going to be shocked and angry that they could have been fooled, just like the Munchkins by the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I remember the day like it was yesterday, right?
Well, I have a saying now that God works through Google. In my life, God works through Google. Everyone's afraid of this algorithm. Google's tracking everything you read, everything you see, every site you go to. And they're afraid, like, oh, who's going to know that I visit this X site or that site? Well, personally, folks, I don't care who knows, you see? And because I have that attitude, Google knows everything I like. And it put on my desktop a link to a version of the Zapruder film that has the frames that were taken out at the grassy knoll. And what they have not wanted the world to see is the courage of Jacqueline Kennedy. There was only one hero in Dealey Plaza that day, and it was not the Secret Service. They really screwed up. Jackie, when she heard Jack making she said horrible gurgling noises, she slid over in the car. She put her arm around his shoulder. At that moment, she was comforting him because he was choking. She just had her arm around his shoulder close to his neck, and the bullets from the grassy knoll opened up. First, his head exploded, as you've all seen. But that was not the only shot. Here's where the cover-up began. 3 shots arrived within a very short space of time. And to make it look like it was all one event and one shot, they cut out the space between the arrival of the first shot and the third shot.
Of
and
course.
in doing so, they also deleted Jackie's actual motions, and I'm going to describe them to you. I described the first one. She slid across the back seat and put her arm around her husband, Jack, comforting him. His head exploded with the first shot. She winced and opened her eyes, and she was thrown back. And then she reached around with 2 arms. She hugged him like a boyfriend and girlfriend hug, an embrace. She hugged him and looked around as if trying to protect him. And then 3 more shots hit him. 2 more shots hit him. He was shot the first time. She recoiled. She embraced him, and then 2 more shots hit him again, and one carried some of her hair away. She almost lost her arm with the second shot that went through the back of his head. Her arm was so close that it was almost shot off.
Oh, my God.
When that went, the piece of the bone, the back of the head, went onto the trunk, and she tried to actually catch it in the air as a ball player might try to catch a ball that was flicked quickly to him or her. And then, as she was hugging him, the next shots hit him, and that's the shot that went through his head and hit Governor Connolly. There was a so-called magic bullet, but it wasn't the way they told it. You see, they took a lie. They made a big lie, and from a half lie, and they juxtaposed all the events, and it's an optical illusion. Every time you see the film of President Kennedy being murdered, there are two things that are being murdered. President Kennedy is being murdered, and the truth is being murdered before your eyes. Imagine this. I've just described to you that Jackie reached over, extended her arm, put her arm around Jack's shoulder, comforting him. The shot came, and she recoiled, and she went back, and her arms left. And then she hugged him again with two arms, okay? At 18 frames per second, you can imagine that if it took 1 second to put her arm around him the first time, that's 18 frames removed. And then her arm retracting, that's another 18 frames. And then both her arms hugging him, that's another 36 frames, because she released him to go chase the piece of bone. So imagine that you're seeing a movie that describes what I've seen. A woman putting her arm around the man, retracting her arm, then embracing him with two arms, and then recoiling back and removing her two arms. Imagine that film with all the arm movements removed.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, and that they took out a lot.
Right. So what would you see? You would see a trembling body about to move to extend arms, recoiling back with arms retracted, and moving again to extend arms, and then recoiling again, and then turning and going on the back of the car. That's what really happened. I speak to you today as an eyewitness to what really happened in Dealey Plaza. And everything that I've told you was told to me by William Newman, who was the closest president to President Kennedy at the time that he was mortally wounded. But he did not describe Jackie embracing him and hugging him. And my
do you have a copy of this video? Did you download?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I'm preparing it. I'm working on a movie with Dr. Gary Null. You know, Gary Null of Pacifica Radio and NPR. Anyway, long story. He was my first supporter 20-something years ago, 21 years ago. He came to my house, and I presented it to him, and he believed in me. And he gave me the springboard to go on and be recognized. And I am preparing the public because this is really horrific. What I've described to you is the most beautiful thing you can imagine. But what I have not described to you is the real horror of what happened. The Zapruder film, for all the horror that you see, has been cleaned up. It's sanitized. His murder was worse than what you were allowed to see. What you are seeing in the modern Zapruder film is what the government wants you to see. It is what they concocted to get away with the single bullet theory. And it was done in exactly the same way that I have just told you. Put your fingers out, and each finger represents 5 shots. Put your first 2 fingers, your thumb and index finger together. That's the space that was taken out between the arrival of the first shot and the second shot. Take your 3 open fingers and put the pinky and the middle finger together, and that is all the time that was removed between the arrival of the next 3 shots. From behind and 2 from the grassy knoll. Now, folks, you know your real history. You know how badly you have been fooled, deceived. And that's why I say,
we got a couple questions here for you on that before we go to the next issue. Did you have something you want to say, Sasha? Okay, Bob, can we hear you? What did you want to say to Robert about what was best being addressed, the new images?
They're fantastic. If he can actually show us some of the stuff that he's actually describing, oh, jeez. You know, it pulls in a lot more what I've been really starting to think is that Kennedy was on to the ET stuff that Eisenhower told him
and that's why they took him out, because he demanded.
You're absolutely right.
Because he demanded this stuff to be on his desk within 10 days. BBC pulled both those things, and I have copies of them. And nice to meet you there, Bob.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There was a whole laundry list of offenses in their eyes. President Kennedy wanted to tell the people about the truth about UFOs. President Kennedy wanted to pull out of Vietnam. He wanted to change the Cold War into a cooperative effort with the Russians to go to the moon, develop scientific discoveries. He was out to change the world, and he was doing it too fast for the powers that be. He was
about to fire LBJ, too. He was about to fire LBJ and drop him from the ticket next to him.
Oh, and LBJ is one of the main killers of President Kennedy.
Yes.
LBJ inherited the assassination apparatus of the United States government, which had been operating since the 1950s. It was something called the 5412 Committee, and it was under the directorship of the Vice President of the United States. They did that so that the President would be kept out of the loop and would have plausible deniability. But this was an apparatus designed to kill political opponents, and it was the one that was put in place to kill Castro in 1959. So when Kennedy refused to invade Cuba in 1963, Operation Northwoods, which was supposed to be in December, what I believe happened. And now let me tell you what Northwoods was. A false flag attack, a terrorist act in the United States that would be blamed on Castro, Cuba, and the Soviet Union to be a cause for invading Cuba. Well, President Kennedy refused to go along with that plan because it called for the military to plant a bomb in Miami, a terrorist bomb that would kill scores of people and would be blamed on Castro. President Kennedy refused to do that. And what they did is they moved up Operation Northwoods from December, close to Christmas, to November, close to Thanksgiving, to outrage the American public with this terrorist act. The murder of President Kennedy is the first worldwide, global terrorist event. And that was the purpose. Instead of the bomb being blown up in Miami, they decided, we've got to get rid of this guy, we're going to kill him, we're going to blame it on Castro, and then we'll have the excuse. But the plan failed when they failed to kill Oswald, necessitating the murder of Oswald by Jack Ruby, who was part of this plot to kill Castro.
Right.
But here's the irony. Nixon was in charge. Nixon expected to be elected in the 1960 election. The Kennedy organization stole the election. The mafia stole the election in Chicago by throwing voting machines into the Chicago River, and Kennedy wound up President of the United States. The irony is that Nixon didn't become president, got booted out of the government, had a deep hatred for Kennedy because they knew that they stole the election. But the deepest irony is this. Lyndon Johnson inherited the chairmanship of the 5412 Committee. He inherited the assassination apparatus of the United States government. And he was directing all the murders in the Caribbean that he confessed to when he talked to Walter Cronkite in 1973. So
yes, and all of those policies started at the Iron Mountain Conference in Iron Mountain, Pennsylvania, 1962 to 1967.
Iron Mountain, New York. Yes?
Oh, Iron Mountain,
Indeed.
New York. Yeah. It all started at Iron Mountain when they decided that peace was a problem and death was the answer.
Yes, I read Report from Iron Mountain in 1968, and I was amazed by it. And since 1968, oh my Lord, almost it's going on close to.
We have about 1 minute before break. Who was they? Who made this decision for the world?
Well, the Rand Corporation was involved in this. The government put those guys in Iron Mountain to run this conference and to come up with these numbers. And the problem is exactly that. These people had no humanity. They looked at human beings as numbers and statistics. And they came up with the idea of brushfire wars, controlling a great war by having a lot of little wars fought by surrogates, the offshoring of our industry, on and on.
Okay, we'll park that. We'll be back in 5 minutes, Robert.
Sure.
Back after this commercial break in 5 minutes with Janet Listen, Dr. Listen, Robert Morningstar, emily-windsor-cragg. See you in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. I will be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, Captain Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you having all the broadcast shows of 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first served, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me, Laser.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
Revolution Radio, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, on Studio B for Momentary Zen, with host Zen Garcia, at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Jacqueline Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we have an incredible episode of the Sacred Matrix today. But before we get back to that, I'd like to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener-supported, and we do need your donations, so please take a little trip over to the donate button and walk your fingers there, and please press the donate button and donate whatever you can. $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donation. And today you're rejoining a show with Robert Morningstar and Emily-Windsor-Cragg, Robert Evans Jr., myself, Jacqueline Lesson, and Dr. Sasha Lesson. And I'd like to cover a couple things. Who's in control of this planet and what's going on when we come back for this final hour? And what about Ebola Gate and the ISIS crisis, all these false flag events? These are some of the things I want to talk about in the second hour. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I don't want to talk. I really want to hear Robert Morningstar talk. Because if I talk, I don't learn nothing, right? But it seems like the way the Kennedy assassination was orchestrated, with the problem and the reaction and then the solution, which is already provided, was just like a blueprint for what they were going to do with the Twin Towers and the Murrow Building in Oklahoma as a sort of a warm-up. The first thing Clinton said after, it must have been Al-Qaeda. Oh, oops, that's too soon. I'm out of line. I know you know a hell of a lot more about it than I do, Robert, so I'd really like to hear what you got to say about these things.
And one more thing. I know that Kennedy was in on the, and I think it went all the way to at least Reagan was in on the know. I know Reagan knew about the extraterrestrials. He had his own little personal spy who I've talked to that was in Area 51 and called him every night with the report. So, okay.
But Reagan had his own he had two UFO experiences that are related. One is told by Shirley MacLaine, and the other one is an official story. You can see it depicted on YouTube that while Reagan was governor of California, he was on his private jet, jetting around California being governor, and they were being paced by a UFO. And they all saw it, the pilots, co-pilot, Reagan, and Reagan ordered them, the pilots, to divert from their course and follow the UFO. The UFO maneuvered and just took off straight up into outer space. And that's also already been told and very, very beautifully depicted in a series of television programs about presidential UFOs. And there's also a website that you can all go to that's run by a great Canadian researcher named Grant Cameron.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's called Presidential UFOs.
Oh,
and
okay.
Everything. Presidential UFOs, and he has a tremendous amount of documents from the Roosevelt era. It turns out that in the Roosevelt era, we were doing recoveries of UFOs. The first recovery was not Roswell. The first recovery of a UFO was actually after the Battle of L.A., that the Battle of L.A., February 25th, 1942?
Yeah, 40.
Tell our listeners about it, even if we know.
Okay. Well, on February 25th, 1942, just 2 months or so after Pearl Harbor, 3 months or so, a UFO appeared over Los Angeles, and the country was in a kind of war frenzy and, dare I say, paranoia, because Pearl Harbor had been attacked. They expected an attack on the West Coast. What actually happened is a UFO showed up over Los Angeles. It was spotted by the sky watchers of the time, reported, and they thought it was a Japanese attack. So all the artillery turned its guns upward, and all the spotlights shot upward, and they caught the UFO in the spotlight glare, and they fired something like 1,200 shells at it.
And they killed 7 people. they killed 7 people on the ground with those shots.
They fell into Los Angeles. What goes up must come down. But the craft made its way south and headed toward Catalina Island, and it was pursued. It was seen to head south to Catalina Island. Then a squadron of pursuit planes. That's what we called fighters in those days. So that's why it's a P-51 and a P-38. You know, it's not an F-50 because they were called pursuit planes. So this pursuit squadron was sent down. And something happened down by Catalina Island. The United States Navy recovered a craft. Now, this craft in Los Angeles, everyone thinks that it was a flying saucer, dome-shaped UFO, but I think that's wrong. What happened is the craft has been described by an eyewitness. He was a young boy. He was 8 years old when he saw it, and he and his mother saw it. He said it was a lozenge-shaped craft. He said it was faceted. It looked... Well, a lozenge is like a diamond shape, okay? It glowed somewhat orange. Well, what happened, the craft was so big, I call it a black triangle. The craft was so big that when the first spotlight hit it, the other spotlights joined on that spotlight, and all of them reflecting off the bottom created a globe of light that creates the illusion that that's the flying saucer. But the thing is gigantic. It's far bigger. It's actually in the clouds above, and I have found really excellent quality photographs of that Battle of LA photo, and enhancing them brought out the corners of the triangle. That's why I can tell you this. That was recovered. But prior to that, in Missouri in 1941, a silvery craft crashed. It was Port Girardeau, Missouri, and the people rushed to the plane crash, and they rescued the pilot, and the pilot was an extraterrestrial. And the people were so, they were so righteous in those days that even though the creature or the pilot looked like something otherworldly, they felt that he deserved the blessings, and they called a reverend, a Protestant minister, to come and minister the last rites to this alien. And there are 2 photos that are purported to be photos of the Port Girardeau alien. And I believe they are both authentic because
what did he look like?
He actually is a very small, diminutive little gray with a round head and oriental black eyes, little mouth, little nose, and it's really pathetic. He really looks like he crashed, and these men are holding them, and here are the 2 photographs. One is a photograph of the men holding them, holding the pilot. The second photograph, which I believe is even more authentic, is a photo taken behind the man who took the first photo with a flash. And you know what I mean? Flash, there was a newspaper guy took the picture. And flash bulbs were not that common in those days for people who had brownie cameras or, ordinary cameras. They weren't built in. So what I figure this man did is he stood behind the photographer, the reporter who was going to shoot the picture, and he opened his brownie to just be open while the guy flashed his camera. And he used the reporter's flash to make his picture. And as a result, the silhouette of the reporter with his hat on and the camera is in his picture because it's backlit. The flash hit the subjects and illuminated everything in front of him, but the man's body blocked the light from hitting the second camera. It's a fantastic photograph.
Oh, that's wonderful
evidence. That's why I think it's authentic. They both show the same thing, but from 2 different vantage points.
Is there any way our listeners can look at these photos? Do you have on a web page or something, or?
Well, if you type in Port Girardeau UFO, P-O-R-T, let's see, Girardeau, Girardieu.
Wow. Okay.
Français. It's French. Port Girardeau, Missouri, UFO. A lot of stuff will come up, and that picture will be, I'm sure, will be among them.
Wow, thank you for that. Amazing. Yeah.
So what did you learn about the Navy, what the Navy recovered after the Battle of L.A.?
Yeah. What
it is some people say it was a piece of it, and other people say that it was the whole thing damaged. This thing was so big in the picture that I've seen that I think it'd be really almost impossible to recover the whole thing. And since it was attacked by the pursuit planes and it was hit by the shells that damaged it, it did hit it. A shell hit it. It got weakened and headed south. But it was chased by about 5 P-40 pursuit planes. That's the Warhawk, like the Flying Tiger planes that we had at that time. They're called Flying Tigers because of the mouth they painted them on in China. Anyway, it is believed that the Navy recovered enough of the craft to begin its own research in developing American UFOs. And the other thing I have to tell you is that recently, someone on YouTube, on the internet, leaked a video that was smuggled out of Area 51, and it's called that Banned Area 51 UFO, smuggled out of Area 51. That's the header on it. And it's released by this fellow that I really admire. He's anonymous. His name is Dark Skywatcher 74. This fellow has connections, I'll tell you that. And he has put out a tremendous amount of photos and films that I have used in my lectures because he puts them out and I confirm that they're authentic. Now, let me tell you how I confirm that this is authentic. The first time I saw this video, it's a black and white video. It has a NASA logo on it. And you see 3 UFOs, white spherical UFOs, making a turn, doing the course around pylon in an airport, right? So it's intriguing. The radio communication sounds authentic. The logo looks authentic. And then the second time I see it, I start looking at, of course I'm looking at the UFOs, but I'm now seeing, my eyes are made to pay attention to what's not in the center of the picture. And I start looking at the airport. Is this an authentic Area 51 UFO? Well, let's see. I've been studying Area 51 for 25 years. And I know all the pictures from space, and the Russian pictures, and the American pictures, and the ones that local people have taken. Oh, let me just see. So I start looking at this, and I start seeing an obtuse runway. Obtuse is an angle that's bigger than 90 degrees, right? Most runways you see, they're crossed like T's or parallels. Area 51 has an obtuse, with big, long runways that meet at an angle bigger than 90. And I see that go by, and I say, whoa, and look at the terrain. Yeah, that looks like, hey, wow, look at that satellite dish, and that building, and that hangar. And I go, wait, man, this really does look like Area 51 to me. So I stop the film, and I start focusing not on the UFOs, but on the structures. There's a satellite dish in front of a building that looks like a pylon. It looks like a whole array of lights. It doesn't look like windows. And it's a tall tower, and in front of it is a satellite dish that has a tetrahedral probe. That means that the thing sticking out of it is not one probe sticking out of a dish. It was 3 coming from the sides, converging on a center, which is a tetrahedron. Then I advance the film, and I see another satellite dish, and this one has a pyramidal probe instead of a single probe, or the 3, it had 4 that were joining in the center, and there's another unique building behind that. That looks like Area 51. And then it goes on and on and on. I see the big hangar. I see the 2 parallel runways that have giant taxiways, giant trackways that look like the trackways at Cape Canaveral where they used that giant steam, the Caterpillar that put the shuttle in position. Remember, it crawled hugely wide. It crawled at about 1.5 miles an hour. So I see that and I said, well, this is it. All I have to do is find pictures of those satellite dishes and those towers and that hangar, and it proves that this is Area 51. So I go and I search, and there's a site called Lazy G Ranch, L-A-Z-Y-G Ranch, all one word, Lazy G Ranch. And these people are dedicated to outing Area 51. so their photos pop up, and there is the satellite dish with the tetrahedral dish. There is the satellite dish with the pyramid top. There are the pylons with light towers and arrays. There's the giant barn, and so on and so forth. And it really is Area 51. And the camera looks like it's automatic tracking camera, Air Force type, and it's following these craft around the course. So I announced this on my friend Scott Teeter's show on Far Out Radio about a month and a half ago. And he was intrigued by it. And he starts talking to me. He says, those things look pretty small. I said, well, on the contrary, I think those things are huge and at least as big as a Humvee. And so the question puzzled me. So I said, let me go back. I'm going to look for ground references. I'm going to look for cars on the ground, trucks, cars, people, doors that I can use to gauge the size of these UFOs. So I run the video again. This is now a couple of weeks after I discovered that in the previous. And I start going around and stopping it. And I'm looking for a car, looking for a person, looking for a truck. And I'm doing this over and over, and I found them. And I think I'm right. These objects are at least as big as a Humvee or a truck. But then I hit stop, and my eyes literally popped out of my head, because not only did I see the 3 UFOs that are flying around the course, I found 8 more on the ground on a taxiway waiting to get their turn. Because the video is labeled Gravitational Propulsion System Flight Test. So what I see is a lead, one experienced pilot leading 2 others around the course as they're being tested, and it just happened to catch 8 others on the ground waiting for their turn to go up. So folks, be happy. The USA has UFOs.
Right.
Well, yeah, but Germany has had them since 1928. I have pictures of German saucer craft going back to 1928, yeah. And we got those from Operation Paperclip, didn't we?
Well, you see, it's half and half. The Germans recovered a UFO, a crashed UFO from Turkey in the 1920s. This is how this story starts. It's very interesting. The Germans were really great archaeologists and philologists and scholars, and they went out to search the world. They're the ones that put together the evolution of languages. In Indo-European languages, the Germans are the ones that found out, who discovered that all the that they came from the Indo-Persia. Anyway, so a German in Turkey heard a story from a Turkish farmer who said that he saw a steel house fall out of the sky and crash into a hillside, and that it was partially buried, but it was a steel house. The German said, steel house falling out of the sky? This sounds a little strange, I think I better investigate this. So he went, he had the farmer take him to the site, and what the Germans found was that the steel house was a crashed flying saucer. So they alerted Germany, and Germany made a contact with Turkey, and they made a deal to allow them to remove it, and that's how the earliest crashed UFO that I know of got to Germany. So from that, they presented that to Victor Schauberger, and they developed this idea of vacuum drives and electromagnetogravitics, but they also went into the Vedas, and they read the Upanishads and the Mahabharata, and they recognized that Vimana, flying craft, were UFOs or flying saucers. But what they were able to do was they were able to decipher the code of the Vedic language for the constituents that they used to build their UFO. And they found out that the Vedic word for the liquid that they used to power their UFOs was mercury. So they developed, by translating the ancient Hindu language, which is not what is spoken today, it's called Vedic, by working on translating that language and its real meaning, they found out that mercury was a principal constituent of the drive. Then they found out that by making the mercury spin in a vortex and charging it up with electricity, that it changed the electromagnetic-gravitic field that surrounds every one of us. And that's how they got started with the bell.
That's where the bell came from.
Excuse me?
That's where the bell came from.
Hello?
That's where the bell came from.
Yes. It was a
the
drive
bell, yes.
system. It was a drive system. It wasn't a ship on itself. It was a drive system they would have put into one of those flying saucers. Then they
could put it in. Right. They could put it in anything. See, since this thing, the propulsion system changes the electromagnetic-gravitic field around an object, you could actually put it in almost any shaped object, and it really wouldn't matter, because it eliminates the atmosphere's resistance and gravity's resistance to motion, and it moves electricity within it and around it that makes it move in particular ways. They can't turn the way our airplanes turn exactly. You know, they talk about right angle turns that the UFOs are seen to make. That's because the electromagnetic principles of navigation or steering require that they can't make really smooth turns, or in those days they couldn't. They had to make 90-degree turns or 115-degree turns, and turns of a specific nature in order to maneuver. You know, there's so many people are leaking so much information. It's incredible.
Sasha wants to say something.
Edward Snowden has become a model for a lot of people because he had the guts, you know, to give up his whole life to leak what he leaked. And I think a lot of other people are saying, well, you know, they're accusing him of crime, but what crime is there in exposing an unconstitutional crime of a higher nature than just revealing classified information that shouldn't be classified anyway? You know, we're living in what I call the national insecurity state. You see, they call it the national security state, but the way they keep us in control is by making us always feel insecure. So I call it the national insecurity state. And they're so afraid that the truth will come out that they are in desperate quarters right now, because truth is burgeoning. Truth is exploding from every quarter.
It
is.
We're
getting back to the way Americans used to think, and tell the truth and put the facts out in the open. Because if we are making our decisions, political decisions and life decisions, on false, fake facts, you know, this is what I say to people. If it's
There's
fake,
no
it's
problem
not a
that
fact.
can be solved if you don't have the truth. And we
Right.
don't have the truth about practically anything, and so everything is in a mess, and we're in a quagmire. And so, yes, that's why we're getting together tonight to muddle through this and pick out what's true so that we can plan. How are you going to plan if you don't know what's true?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's true is that we have discerned that the model for public deception that was initiated with the Kennedy assassination is the model for every other deception that they've carried out. And that includes what you mentioned, the Oklahoma City bombing, the World Trade Center.
1993.
Everything.
Yeah, all of them.
A methodology was developed, and you know the methodology involves controlling information, because few people know or realize that the idea of pool reporting originated with the Kennedy assassination. Prior to that, any time there was a great crime or national incident or whatever it was, disaster, every news agency went into the field attacking it as detectives would, competing with each other to get the scoop, you see, to get the contacts. And so we had two police systems in those days. One was the regular police investigatory bodies, you know, FBI, local police, sheriffs, etc. But we had a second police, which was a civilian police, which were reporters, real journalists, the Dorothy Kilgallons, the Edward R. Murrows. See? And they used to go in there and they would scratch out the truth and come up with the scoop and solve the crime sometimes before the police and give the police the scoop, But all of that changed with the Kennedy assassination because they had to control all the reporters, from assaulting the 100 witnesses that were there, and to control every bit of information. So they came up with the idea of pool reporting, which was reporting to the Dallas Police Department. All the reporters sat there, and reporter Jack Ruby was there that first night on Friday, to out Oswald as the member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. But that was just how they started to control information. Nothing got to the reporters. It wasn't filtered by the Dallas Police Department, the FBI, and whoever was conducting. But at that point, it was the Dallas Police Department because they were at loggerheads with the federal government. The Secret Service had stolen President Kennedy's body illegally and ferreted it out of Dallas. They had no right to take the body. The only crime committed that day was a murder in Texas. It was not a crime to kill a president of the United States. It became a crime later when they passed a law seeing to it. But as the coroner, Earl Rose, who fought with the Secret Service over, he no, you're not taking it out. They pulled a gun and put it to his head. And he said, as far as I'm concerned, this is just another murder. And the Texas law requires that an autopsy be done in Texas. And so that's how this whole melodrama, this ritual was conducted. And it was
two other things happened. Officer Tippit, who looked so much like Kennedy that everybody called him on his beat, Mr. Kennedy, is the one that the Kennedy autopsy pictures are of, because Kennedy's head was blown apart, but in the Officer Tippit autopsy pictures, he's Officer Tippit looks pretty much intact in those autopsy pictures. And then in the 1993s, to make things worse, news was taken from the history department of news organizations and placed in the entertainment department. So since the 1990s, news is considered entertainment.
Wow.
Yes, I'm very glad. I said happy. Yes, I am happy. I'm smiling because to hear you say to the audience exactly what I discovered. I'm the person that brought that out. I'm the person that in 1992, 93, 94 discovered step by step that the photographs that they've been showing us purportedly of President Kennedy are not President Kennedy. They are doctored up, dressed up, made up photos of Officer Tippit. And his photos were used to fool the world. But they couldn't fool me, because I knew the real John F. Kennedy and the real Robert Kennedy. They were my brothers. They were more than idols. I felt a kinship with Robert and John. I have many names. Robert John was my first name. So my kinship with them is very deep. And it started in 1958 when Kennedy was starting to come up as a potential candidate. I saw him on TV and I said, wow, who is that guy? Who talks that way? So, anyway, it dawned on me. It came slowly. I'll tell you how it happened. The first thing I discovered was that we had been lied to about Tippit's wounds because the New York Times had reported that Tippit had been shot in the eye, that he was horribly disfigured, and that no one was allowed to see his body. It was buried in a sealed coffin, and it was buried the next day. It was buried on Saturday. And because of this horrible wound and disfigurement of his face, no one, not even his family, was allowed to see the body. I read that on November 23rd about his murder, and on November 24th about his funeral. And so this is something that I really know. I was told he was shot in the eye. when in 1992 I was asked how was Tippit killed, I said that. But I said, let me make sure. And I picked up a book that was within arm's reach, and the book is called The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop, who was one of those great reporters that I mentioned. Kilgallen, who died for what we're learning now. She learned this in 1965, and she was killed for it. So this is for Dorothy Kilgallen. Tippit was killed with shots in his side, his rib cage. One shot hit the button on his tunic, his police uniform, and gouged his stomach. It scarred and created a 4-inch gouge across the abdomen. And then, as he lay wounded, the assassin walked over to him, knelt down close to the ground, put the gun to Tippit's temple, and fired a shot into his head. The bullet traversed from Tippit's temple to the top of the back of his head. It cracked his skull, but did not exit. The bullet was lodged in there. Okay? When I read that in May of 1992, my brain went, wow, this is it. This is it. This is the only thing that can explain the Warren Commission autopsy. Tippit was shot with a bullet through the brain that had exactly the same trajectory that is reported by the Warren Commission autopsy report. The brain described in the Warren Commission autopsy report is an intact brain, weighed 1,500 grams. That's a very big brain. We see in the Zapruder film and from the reports from the hospital that about 1/2 to 1/3 of President Kennedy's brain, his left brain, was left. His right brain was liquefied. It was gone. 3 shots through the head. Most of it oozed out through the wound in the back of the head. I mentioned Jackie went to grab a fragment of the bone. That's the hole in the back of the head that they've hidden all these years. So I assumed that they had taken Tippit's brain, presented it to the autopsist. The autopsist looked at the brain and said, oh, it was shot through 1 bullet through the head. It went from the brain. Well, the thing is, they couldn't tell the track, because you can tell the track, but you can't tell the direction. That's a simple fact. So then I thought, oh, I've got it. This is the key. So I went to Chicago and made a lecture before a closed audience of JFK researchers from around the world. And at that place, I asked a question. And I said, why haven't we ever seen a second picture of Tippit? We only have one, and he looks about 26 years old in the picture. But I know from his biography that he was 39 years old, a much older man. And nobody has an answer. Why haven't we seen a picture of Tippit? I said, does anybody have Tippit's autopsy? Why haven't we seen Tippit's autopsy? And I said, I believe that they may have taken President Kennedy's brain to do this autopsy. And people laughed. But the man at the podium was Professor George Michael Levica, Hartford University, or University of Hartford. And he said, hey, don't laugh. I've gone down to Dallas. I've investigated Tippit, and I found out that Tippit bore such a close resemblance to President Kennedy that they used to rib him. His friends on the police department used to rib him and call him Jack and JFK. And all the laughter stopped. And right after that, a man came up to me, Dan DuPont of North Hollywood, and he said, Mr. Morningstar, I heard what you said. I'd like to help you. I said, oh. He said, I have Tippit's autopsy. I said, really? How? He said, well, a Canadian reporter named Gary Muir went down to Dallas in '64, and he got the autopsy report from the coroner's office, and he wrote this report, and I have it. I'm going to give it to you. Thank you very much. The report arrives. Now, I already know the Warren Commission autopsy report when this report arrives, and I start reading it, and my God, I start reading it and reading it. I said, oh, this is a paraphrase of the John F. Kennedy assassination. It's just using different jargon, slightly different words to describe the same thing. So now I thought, oh, they not only used his brain, they also used parts of his body. Because, the story is the body was taken away, it was brought back, curtains were closed, the doctors were told to say, step aside. Then they say, okay, work only on that. Now, don't turn the body, just look at that. That's how it went, if you really know the story of what happened in Bethesda. So, little by little, I started asking, and I started searching for pictures of Tippett. And over the course of the next 2 years, people helped me. And they found more pictures of Tippett. And with each picture, this realization came to me. And God, he does look like President Kennedy. Let me match them up. So I did facial studies. And the photograph that was referred to, I think it was Emily who brought it up, that's my photograph. I took the picture of Tippett and I split it down the middle, and I found a picture of President Kennedy with the same expression, and I split it down the middle. I joined the two, and the men looked like they might have been fraternal twins. Everything except the hairline. Tippett had a balding, receding hairline, and there you have the explanation of all the alteration and surgery to the top of the head. Because they could pass Tippett's face for President Kennedy with makeup and shaving and a little adjustment in camera angles. But a bald spot, you can't. So they carved the skull up, reflected the skin, and made it look like a part of this wound scenario that they've concocted. But folks, I've spoken to President Kennedy's cousin in Dallas on the anniversary of the assassination in 1998. I spoke to President Kennedy's cousin, and I said to her, Cherry, you knew Jack all your life. You went to the beach with him. You saw him without a shirt. You saw him on the boat sailing. Did Jack have moles on his neck? He said, no, he had no moles on his neck. I said, well, look at the body. In the Kennedy assassination, there are moles on the neck. There are moles on the ear. I didn't have those moles. But if you look at Tippett, you'll find the moles on the neck and the moles on the ear. Folks, it's Tippett. That's very interesting. And that's God's honest truth. And I've dedicated my life to bringing the truth out.
Well, we've got to figure out what's true, or we can't solve any problems. We have to.
That's right. And we have an obligation. We have an obligation to the country. We have an obligation to our families. I have an obligation to John F. Kennedy, because that man saved the world. That man, on October 17th, he was asked to nuke. October 17th, 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to nuke Russia with a first strike nuclear assault on Russia that would leave them, according to Curtis LeMay, a radioactive heap of burning rubble for 300 years. And Kennedy said, no, I am not going to be the first man to unleash nuclear holocaust on mankind. You will not do that. President Kennedy wept. When he was asked to do that, he wept. And he said that. And he was speechless, actually. He was really speechless. He cried in his chair. And the generals looked at him as a sissy, a coward. And Robert Kennedy interjected. And in this moment, when Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy saved the world, Robert Kennedy said, no, gentlemen, you are not going to turn my brother into Tojo. If we were to do this, we would be no better than the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. And that's when John got his courage, and he said, no, gentlemen, we are not going to do this. I am not going to be the first man to unleash nuclear holocaust on mankind. Stand down. We're going to find another way. And that's the day that he saved the world. And I owe it to him.
So, Robert, I'm going to fast forward in time. So it was fascinating, by the way. We don't have a lot of time left on the show. And we want to bring it current to, what is going on now. We were talking about Snowden earlier, and there's an article in the Examiner.com today, and it says, will the NSA leak bring disclosure of alien life without official acknowledgement? So apparently Snowden is our hero today, and he's still leaking this information, which we need the truth. We were talking earlier in the show, we have a system of hierarchy that sucks. Most people are living in virtual slavery, and we need to know and cover it in 15 minutes how we're going to come out of this to the other side.
I'll give you a pointer. There's a website called Veterans Affairs, And there's a gentleman who writes for it named Preston James, and he touched today on this very same subject, that disclosure is unfolding according to a very strict and prescribed schedule. They will not let us know. Yes, just today, veteranstoday.com, Preston James, and he goes in detail into how this it's going to happen. It is happening. It can't be held back. The people already know. And I've been saying for years, folks, it's not going to be the government that tells us that UFOs are real. It is we who are going to tell the government that UFOs are real. Right? And so they're going to have to own up because it is plain and obvious. I've been told by a person who has very close connections that the aliens told the U.S. government back in 2010, you've got to tell the people of our presence. It's part of a contract. It's part of an agreement. And that the U.S. government has broken the agreement. And the aliens said, okay, if you do not tell your people, we are going to manifest and show them and expose your deception. And that has been happening around the world since
October 2010.
Excuse me?
October
of 2010 is when the aliens really started to show themselves more and more and more than they've ever done before.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it was a very specific and important date. The date that happened, I was in New York because it happened here, it happened in Fort Worth, it happened all across the country, but the biggest one was in New York. That was October 13th of 2010. October 13th, so important because, A, the superstition of Friday the 13th started October 13th, 1307, which is when all the Templars were rounded up by the Catholic Church in France and then held for 2 months and tortured and executed on November 22nd, 1307. Okay, so these two dates, October 13th and November 22nd, are intimately connected. Bad luck Friday the 13th. That's how it started. Second thing, and more important thing, it was the 93rd anniversary of the miracle of Fatima.
Oh,
That's something that, yes. And I think that the disclosure, my personal opinion is that the real disclosure, the global disclosure, is going to be dressed up for October 13th, 2017, the 100th anniversary of the miracle of Fatima.
Okay. Makes sense.
That's what I've... But Preston James does a very good job in this article.
John Paul II knew about that. Pope John Paul II knew. Personally, he didn't tell the whole thing. When he was asked about that back in 1980, he said basically that the communists were being kept, they weren't being told the third secret because they would start grabbing country around the world. But what if it was in writing that the world's oceans would quickly cover all the continents, killing millions within minutes? Why talk about it? The next year, he was almost assassinated for doing that. You know, the thing with the, I'm trying to think of the right name right now, with the Templars, they had almost a direct link back to the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, they had huge wall carvings made of them. One of them shows a fantastic cross hanging around its neck. Okay? That cross is linked to the mark of Cain. And the Catholic Church told Templars and the Hospitallers to use that mark on their shields and on their clothes. And after the Templars found everything they were going to find over in Jerusalem, they went racing back to Europe, and they became the most richest people around. They also started the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, and the Freemasons. So there's a direct link with all of our leaders and stuff.
Well, that's why I think they chose October 13th. And you know what? The exposure, the global exposure of the deception, I called it the global UFO roundup. You know, remember I said the Templars all rounded up on October 13th? So in this way, roundup was exposing the big lie in our time.
What happened October 13th, 2010? I missed that. Could you say that again?
Oh, New York was overflown by a huge fleet of UFOs that was seen by thousands of people in the streets. And if you go into YouTube, actually CBS caught some very good pictures of a few of them, but they never gave you the big sky picture of like 50 spherical white pearl UFOs going around the city. Then they released these pictures of balloons and said that people confused this bundle of balloons, silver balloons, for UFOs. But thousands of people, and the thing is, CBS News had a camera there, and they got shots of these spheres flying by over the Hudson River, and I myself have seen them. They've descended to within 75 feet of the ground in my presence while I was teaching Tai Chi at this special place called the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. In 2007...
what are they going to do about all these murders that have happened, like Kennedy's? That's one of the problems with disclosures, that a lot of people are going to have to face, their karma, their murder. And the other thing is that there's going to be all these suits because they've been, especially in terms of abductions, so there's going to be hundreds of thousands of lawsuits.
Well, that's the reason I said that the government can't come up and disclose unless they pass a law. Unless they pass a law granting themselves a pardon before divulging. Because they have lied about abductions, they have lied about mind control, they have lied about cattle mutilations. And imagine the lawsuits when it's divulged that the aliens have been using cow uteruses and genetic material to keep their race going and all of that story. And the farmers say, dang, they lied to me. They let it happen. They made a deal allowing them to do that, and they would send in the black helicopters come in and sanitize the area. They remove any sign. They leave the carcass. Part of it is terrorism. Part of it is to scare people, keep them scared and bewildered. But the other part of the black helicopter scene is they're the sanitizers. They come in and clean up as much as they can of any alien residue, radioactivity, contamination of soil, and it's, clean and sweet.
So the aliens are abducting it, but the humans come in and clean up the scene. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, people say, is it black helicopters or is it UFOs? My thing is, the UFOs come in, the aliens do the deed, they take the cow, they do their thing, they drop it down, and the black helicopters have been tracking them. They know where it is, and they go in first, and they hover, and they shine the lights, and they make themselves obvious, because the U.S. government would prefer the public to think that the black helicopters are doing the cattle mutilations than to admit that it's aliens.
So what are they doing with all this cattle material? What's the purpose?
Well, genetic engineering is what most experts conclude, and those in the know. Genetic engineering in the sense of trying to keep their dying race going, and the other one is to create a hybrid of theirs with ours, and to use the hybrids to change our society. I believe that's already happened. I believe
so is that why they're terraforming the planet and making it more radioactive and polluting it, that they live in a different environment?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe they're terraforming the planet. And you know what? There's a really good Charlie Sheen movie on this theme called The Arrival. One of the best UFO movies that you'll ever see on this theme of why is global warming happening? Why is carbon being, dumped into the atmosphere? Why is the U.S. government offshoring production to other countries? All of it's all wrapped up in this really good movie called The Arrival with Charlie Sheen. He goes down to Mexico and he encounters aliens and he finds out that it's all part of the plan. The New World Order, the Illuminati plan, is to create an enclave for them and write off the rest of humanity, and then aliens will take over the world.
So are there any solutions for us? Anything we can do? If they're not going to do disclosure, this is happening, what can we do?
You can do it by alerting other people and then working politically, actually, to get a change of this order. Really, the next.
But they own all they own the whole political arena. They own everything. They've got the governments. They've got. Yeah.
See, I don't believe that's true. I think that's part of a meme that's been downloaded in us to make us think we're powerless. But listen, we stopped World War III from breaking out in 2013, and it was the first time that a nation, the people of a nation, had stopped their government from going to war. When all the ministers and the prime minister wanted to go to war, and I'm talking about Britain. Britain saved the world from World War III last year because Obama and Cameron wanted to jump into Syria and start with it's a tinderbox, and jumping into Syria assures a war with Russia and Iran at the same time, because Russia and Iran are allied with Syria. So it was ludicrous for us to go to war with Syria, and they were, the meme works in America. They crank up our patriotism and our outrage, and we're ready to go, right? But the British people, they said no, and in Parliament they stopped it, and that's why Obama was unable to cross the red line. They crossed the red line; he wasn't able to go back. Thank God. The last thing we need on this planet is nuclear confrontation. And I'm speaking to you now in the spirit of the man who said, "I am not going to be the first man to unleash nuclear holocaust upon mankind." We must all put that in our heads and take that to our hearts, or else we're all gone.
Is it true that the ETs can stop it? And would they? That's the other question.
Oh, yes. I believe the ETs have shown that they can stop it on many occasions. And my favorite occasion is the Minot Air Force Base event of 1967, when UFOs, and they've done this regularly, folks. We hear about Minot and the one at Rendlesham, but they've been around all our missile bases. The UFO came in over Minot Air Force Base in South Dakota and went over each of the missiles. And ground crews saw it. They alerted the missileers down in the silos, and the missileers started to see all the missiles going down, the computers failing, and the missiles unable to fire. But it's a very big thing if your nuclear arsenal is being put out of business by a UFO. But there was something more alarming that happened afterwards. When they brought in the Boeing contractors to see what had gone wrong with the missiles, they figured out that something had taken over the electrical system and overridden the computer. But they also found out something else. The targeting sites, the latitude, longitude targeting was changed. Do you know what that means? Do you know what the aliens were saying? Hey, if you think you're going to launch this missile from Nevada and hit Moscow, don't be surprised if it hits Washington, because we can change the coordinates on your missiles. Second way they demonstrated they can destroy it is a famous missile test in the 1960s, where we launched a rocket, and we're tracking it with telemetry and cameras, radar tracking. So perfect picture of this missile rising and hitting 5,000 miles an hour, going up into the ionosphere. The UFO is tracking it at 5,000 miles an hour, and the UFO at 5,000 miles an hour makes a circle around he loops around the rising missile, goes to one point, shoot a light at it, goes to another point, shoot a light at it. He shot 3 beams of light at the head of the missile, and the missile disintegrated.
Wow.
Yes, they can't stop nuclear war. And they will stop nuclear war. But they don't really want to go near it. That's one of the reasons that we're a threat, not just to our own planet, but to their own existence. And we have
so
to get
it's harmful to them as well. So it does make sense about Fukushima. They're letting it keep going. We only have 3 minutes. Are there any major revelations that you gained from this conference that you want to share with our listeners before we run out of time?
Well, it is about this subject of the consciousness of, expanding consciousness of all Americans, sharing this information, lighting a candle. One candle can light 1,000 others. Well, that idea is that you have to educate your neighbor, you have to wake them up to the realities, and that we have to really work to change the way this is going. I am tired of seeing police overkill. I'm tired of seeing police being trained to believe that we are the enemy. We have to start to demilitarize police departments and get it back to community policemen who are part of the community. We are not outlaws. And we have to start culling from police departments the militants that they have enlisted over the last decade. You see? It's a mentality that has been brainwashed into soldiers that go there and fight enemies, real enemies, and come back and say, oh, you're going back home to the enemy, and you're going to treat them like the enemy. One of the worst things is the training of our police departments by Israel. I said, why would Israel have to train our police departments? Why? So that they can treat Americans like the Israelis treat Palestinians. That's how police works over there. So I don't know what we're getting. That's something worse. So those are the things that you have to talk to your neighbor about. Do we want our police departments being trained in Israel to treat street protests in America the way Israel treats street protests among the Palestinians in Israel? That's really the reality. So
okay, 1 minute left. How do people reach you, Robert? You have a website?
Go to Facebook, or my email is robert.morningstar@gmail.com if you want to write to me. Or you can find articles by me. UFOdigest.com is where I post a lot of material, and I also publish other people's material that I find really important and worthy of exposure.
UFO Digest, I remember that. Yeah.
That's
UFOdigest.com.
Thank you. That's the end of our show. Thank you, Emily and Bob and Robert and Sasha. Thank you, listeners, for joining us this week. Blessings. Hello.